She's over by the piano. You know what I mean?
Hi, I'm Walter Bird.
Hi,
You
how
with
are you? Yeah, I'm with the Juhl Media on Independent Press.
what is it?
Independent Press.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
New Hampshire or New York?
New City. Yeah.
Nice.
I made 27 films for Andrew Yang movie.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker.
I do communications in New Hampshire for them, so it's
awesome.
trying to introduce myself.
Awesome. Yeah.
So it's online?
Online, I make films. So
Oh, you
yeah,
make films,
all
okay.
my films is on my channel, which
Okay.
is a Juhl Media.
All right. If we have a lot of TV, I'm gonna have you to maybe move in that space because we gotta make room for the TV cameras.
Well, I'll try to fit into because I have small equipment. You know,
I understand
so,
that.
Yeah, I got here before everybody else.
I know that.
Yeah.
We have to accommodate the TV press.
Okay.
And I don't know how many more Collins. Maybe not. Anybody else? We
Yeah.
might be all set.
Yeah, I can always, hide in between their tripod.
Yeah,
You know?
that should be good.
Yeah.
You have the perfect vantage point. You have the perfect vantage point. That's because the early bird gets the worm. Early, not even on time.
Yeah. So we are waiting. I think program is supposed to start at 11:45, but I have a guess. I'm guessing it's probably 12 o'clock. So we're waiting for audience to come in, and this is a town hall for NGN. This is NGN town hall at Nashville. No, Nashua, New Hampshire. Nashua, New Hampshire. I don't know if it's on. Is it already on?
Looks like it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Look, hello, Ching and Nick. Thanks for live streaming this town hall.
Okay.
Tubular seasons
So,
from the Netherlands.
yeah. We still have some time. So, I have a feeling when they say get here 11:45, meaning the whole thing starts 12. You know, I'm just guessing. So you guys, you can just check back with us at 12 o'clock. I'm just setting up right now to see how it goes, and thanks for watching. I probably should shut off just because to save the battery, right? Right?
Yeah, until
Right?
things get,
Yeah,
still
yeah.
things get going.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So at least I know. So I'll see you later, okay? I'm just check. Oh. So
I might be
we
able
have
to.
big cameras here.
I think I can slide over here.
Maybe I'll move like this. You can come. And I'm sitting down, so I don't. I do not. Yeah. Okay.
So if you're like, essentially, if you are the top guy and you're with a couple of BS holidays,
I want to show you. People are coming now. And this is a lot of people. Our first day of New Year.
but if you're like me in the middle, you kind of have to face, New Year's Day.
And here's Youngin. Say hi.
Hi.
We're live streaming.
Happy New Year. Hi.
Youngin Nick. Youngin Sarah.
Yang Gang New Year.
Hi.
January 19th.
Okay, so you have to wait a little bit. Probably it's going to be a little bit.
Next year, or this year, all the major holidays fall on Friday or Saturday. Fourth of July. So that means they add extra days. For example, Christmas falls on Saturday, right? So Friday, well, no, they'll give you Thursday and Friday. Right, they're doing it. You know what I mean? So those are your two holidays. If you work those, which is great, because you can end up working. I normally have Friday. So I can like work it out so that I have Christmas. So the thing is, the other thing is, I have Sundays. I work Sundays. So and Sunday becomes a day in the calendar. Thank you so much. Take Sundays off because they have it as their so that day is always available for me to make a Sunday off. And I don't have to worry about like it's gonna be they're gonna put too many people off that day. I can't take it. I think I already am.
Sorry.
Okay, how y'all doing this morning? How's that sound in the back? I got an uh-oh, So you need more? Do you need more? Or do I just need to hold this closer? Okay, that's more. That is more. Now, you folks in the front, are you like, that's too loud?
Yeah, too loud.
All right, I have 2 jobs. I have 3 jobs. One is to warm you up. 2 is to be a human sound check machine. And 3 is to kill time if necessary, which is related to 1 and 2. All right, how many of you have seen Andrew Yang in person before?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna flip it around. You can only answer yes to one of these. How many of you are seeing Andrew Yang in person for the first time? Whoa, give yourselves a round of applause because you woke up on New Year's Day morning. How about that? Was anybody here at the New Year's Eve bash that counted in the new year right down the street in Nashua last night?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you're here. Now I'm here because I gotta be here. You didn't have to be here. That's very good. My name's Steve Marchand. If you like state and local politics, my name may ring a bell, but maybe not for enough of you, or else I might be governor of New Hampshire right now. That's the hint. So I ran for governor last year, the Democratic race. This just in, I did not win. There would be burly security men all around me. It'd be much more intimidating. But there was a silver lining in that. I used to be the mayor of Portsmouth. I've been involved in state, local, national politics for about 20 years. Native of Manchester who lives on the seacoast. And one good thing about not getting elected governor is I got to meet Andrew Yang through a mutual friend on January 11th, 2019. The day before after my birthday, and 2 days before his. So hint, hint, birthday's coming up. We want to give him a big gift, a belated birthday gift on February 11th, by the way, a victory in the New Hampshire primary. Can I get an amen on that? Amen. When I met him, I liked this guy very quickly. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about him. I knew a lot about these other folks, Biden and Buttigieg and Warren and Sanders. All good people, by the way. We don't hate. We love in the Yang Gang.
Yes. That's right.
Got an amen on that? Here's the thing. I found out quickly that I was going to like this guy. Why? 44-year-old, first-generation American, father of 2 who really likes math. Holy crap, that's me. I love this guy. He became a friend before he became my favorite presidential candidate in a long, long time. Here's why. Once I listened to him, I realized this was the one person talking about the kind of transformational change that is required in a time of tumult. A time when we as a country are trying to figure out who we're going to be, not just for the next 2 or 4 years, but really for the next 20 to 40 years. The last time this country had a political moment like this, whether one likes the result of that transformation or not, was when Ronald Reagan led in the Reagan Revolution in 1980. There's an old joke that George Juhl, the columnist, tells. He says, Barry Goldwater won the 1964 presidential election. It just took 16 years to count the ballots. That's what I'm talking about transformational change. This stuff takes a long time. There's a lot of transition occurring in the country. There are a number of choices we make politically as a country, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, as we are trying to figure out our way. What is it going to mean to be a New Hampshireite? What's it going to mean to be an American for the next generation? I see a lot of people here who are parents and maybe brought their kids. How many people brought their kids here today? Do I see some kids? Yay! Thank you, guys. Let's give a round of applause for the parents who got their kids out of the house in the morning on New Year's Day. I presume that you appreciate more than most. You're demonstrating through your actions the power of the decision we're about to make. 6 weeks from yesterday, we are going to have a primary here. And I tell you what, whether it's Jimmy Carter in 1976, or Gary Hart in 1984, or Pat Buchanan and Paul Tsongas in 92, whether it's John McCain in 2000 and 2008, Bernie Sanders in 2016, this is the state where we like to shock the world. We like to say, if you're an outsider, we realize that the best way to beat an outsider, a president who is an outsider who does not have their act together, is not with an insider. The opposite of an outsider who does not have his act together is an outsider who does have his act together. That is the access point. That is where we make the difference. That is where we make transformational change happen. It's not going to be by going backward, blaming immigrants and building walls. It's going to be by accelerating as fast as we can forward. It is about embracing our immigrant past. It is about the youthful, diverse face of the next generation of America. It is about being pro-entrepreneur and pro-innovation. It is about being honest with the people, and it's about using a little bit of math. Y'all like math? Yeah! I know you like math. You're friggin' wearing it. You're wearing math. And I understand he is moments away. Now, I want to tell you that 2 nights ago, they told me he was 10 minutes away. And 32 minutes later, he showed up. I don't care how much you've liked the last 4 minutes. You do not want 28 more minutes of this. I don't think anybody from Exeter is here today because they had enough of that. All right? Last night, they told me 4 minutes. 22 minutes later, he showed up. He will be punctual as president. As a candidate, we're working on it. We're working on it. But that said, not for real, guys. I'm told he's walking in. I was about to start one of my 8-minute stories when they tell me there's 2 minutes to go, but I don't think I need to do that. Those of you that, how many of you here would call yourself undecided? Yang curious is what we call you. Yang curious. You're among friends. We have another term for Yang curious in the Yang gang. We call you soon-to-be Yang gang. Right? Are you ready for transformational change?
Yes. Yes.
Are you ready to turn the page, not looking back, but going forward?
Yes. Sir.
Are you ready to be able to tell your kids? How many of y'all got kids right now? Whether they're 1-year-old or they're like me. Yeah, come on, guys. We're screwed as a population if 2 of you raise your hand. I know how the math works on that. All right. I want you to be able to tell your kids that at a moment when it mattered most, you made the right choice. It's really easy to go with somebody who's got a title in front of their name. But where I'm from, and I mean, you don't have to look too far in history, say the 2016 election, a majority of the American people do not see a lack of long-time elected experience as a bug. It's a feature. It is a feature. And whether or not you personally are comfortable with that statement or not, I would invite you to talk to your friends over the next 6 weeks and ask them whether or not they think that the way to make big change happen at a time when we keep getting told record stock market going up, inflation record low, unemployment record low, GDP record high. How can we live in a country where those 4 things are true? And yet for 70 to up to 90% of the American people, they will tell you in terms of their personal economy that they are walking an economic tightrope with no safety net underneath. That is what we're talking about. And this is why now, more than ever, we need to make sure that we're not talking at each other or about each other, that we are working with each other, united and determined, that if Andrew Yang actually is as close to being here as this statement I am trying to make, that he's going to have a flourishing ending is going to be, you know what? It actually worked. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the next President of the United States. Give it up to my friend, the man, Andrew Yang.
Good morning, New Hampshire, and Happy New Year! It's 2020.
Yes!
It's a new decade. It's a new era. It's a new morning. So I saw this on the schedule, and I thought, wow, these people must not have partied that hard last night. I had a great night last night. We just reported we raised over $1 million just yesterday alone.
Yes!
$4 million over the last week. I can't break the news because we promised it to some national publication, but we grew more than 50% from Q3 to Q4.
Yeah!
And we raised $10 million in Q3, so it's a lot of growth in the Yang campaign. And the reason is because we're addressing the real problems that got Donald Trump elected in 2016. How many of you know I went to high school here in New Hampshire? And most people don't seem to know that, which is cool, because a lot of people are what I call Yang curious here today. I went to Phillips Exeter Academy and graduated in 1992. And after Exeter, I went to college in Rhode Island at Brown, became a lawyer in New York City, and spent 5 whole months as an unhappy lawyer. I'm sorry if that sounds familiar to someone in this room. And after that, I left to start a business. How many of you have started a business or organization or club or mailing list? So if you have your hand up, you know 2 things. Number 1, it's much harder than anyone ever lets on, right? And number 2, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you say?
Great.
It's going great. My business too went great until it failed. My parents told people I was still a lawyer because it was a much easier story. But I've been bitten by the bug. I worked at another company and another, and I became the CEO of an education company that grew to become #1 in the United States and was bought by a bigger company in 2009. How many of you were here in New Hampshire 10 years ago in 2009? Now, how was the financial crisis in this part of the state? Now, this is probably better insulated than other parts of New Hampshire, but she gave me the double thumbs down. Yesterday in Derry, I asked a similar question, and this 14-year-old boy raised his hand and he raised his hand and said, oh, it was a really tough time. And I looked at him and I joked, I said, how the heck would you remember? You must have been 4 at the time. And he said, well, my parents had to sell my house, so I remember. And I was like, oh yeah, you would remember that. The financial crisis was a disaster for so many communities around the country, and I thought I had some insight as to why it had happened. So many of the smart wannabe whiz kids I'd gone to Exeter and Brown and Columbia with had gone straight to Wall Street to create the mortgage-backed securities and the derivatives and the exotic financial instruments that had crashed the economy. So I thought, that's a train wreck. What do we want our people to do if it's not head to Wall Street and dream up things that are going to end up becoming weapons of mass financial destruction? And I had so much of my career shaped by entrepreneurship that I thought we needed more entrepreneurs to create jobs and businesses in places like Detroit, Cleveland, Birmingham, New Orleans, and cities around the country. So this, in full credit to my wife, because this is where I went from being a fairly normal guy to something less normal. I quit my job to start a nonprofit. How many of you work in nonprofits? How many of you volunteered for a nonprofit? You should really just raise your hand and pretend on that one. There we go. So I quit my job to start a nonprofit. I donated some seed money to start it, and I started calling rich friends with this question: do you love America? And the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. And then 12 people said, I love America for $10,000. It's like, I thought you did. So their money plus my money, we started with about $250,000. And that grew and grew to the millions. We helped create thousands of jobs in 15 cities around the country. I was honored by the Obama administration multiple times as an ambassador of entrepreneurship. So I got to bring my wife to meet the president. My in-laws were very excited about me that week. They're like, oh, she did all right. But unfortunately, my 7 years running Venture for America, traveling the country, gave me this unease where I felt like the work I was doing was pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom, that things were getting worse, not better. How many of you grew up in the Midwest? Let's try that. South? West Coast? Many of you are probably like me, upstate New York, mid-Atlantic. Or let's say New England, that's gonna be most of you. Yeah. I had never seen Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Alabama, Louisiana until those 7 years. And I was blown away by the gulf between regions, where if you fly between Michigan and Manhattan, or St. Louis and San Francisco, you feel like you're crossing dimensions and decades and ways of life and not just a few time zones. But I was still stunned when Donald Trump became our president in 2016. How did you all react that night? Confusion, sobbing. Fear. It was a giant red flag to me. I said, this is not business as usual. Tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided that taking a bet on the narcissist reality TV star was the right way to go. And even if you reacted with fear or tears, we all have family members and friends and neighbors who celebrated his victory. I'm a numbers guy, and I try to find an explanation in the numbers. If you were to turn on cable news networks, why would you think that Donald Trump's our president today?
Russian assistant.
Russia, Facebook, Hillary Clinton, FBI,
Fox News,
emails, media, racism perhaps. But as a numbers guy, I wanted to find an explanation that I could hang my hat on, and I found it. The reason why Donald Trump won in 2016, in my view, is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years. And where were those jobs? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, all of the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win. And if you doubt this explanation, there's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement towards Trump in that area. It happened here in New Hampshire, but it happened earlier in the northern part of the state. You all lost more than 12,000 manufacturing jobs over a period of years. I have been to those towns, and those towns have never recovered. After the plant closed, the shopping centers closed, people left, the schools shrank, and that town now is monitoring how quickly their people are leaving more than any signs of growth. That same pattern played out in communities in Michigan, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Missouri, and that's what got Donald Trump into the Oval Office. Unfortunately, what we did to the manufacturing jobs is now migrating to retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, and eventually truck driving jobs. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon. One word answer, Amazon. Amazon soaking up $20 billion in value every single year, closing 30% of our stores and malls. Most common job in your state, retail clerk. Average retail clerk's a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $10 an hour. When her store closes, what is her next opportunity? How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. Zero, that is your math. New Hampshire, 20 billion out, 30% of the stores closed, you get zero back. When you call the customer service line of a big company and you get the software, the bot, you do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, human, human to get someone on the line. Right? Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that. That software is miserable. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, a little bit seductive. What will that mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work in call centers right now making $14 an hour? How many of you have seen a self-serve kiosk in a fast food restaurant like McDonald's? They say every location in the United States will have self-serve kiosks by next year, and now they're looking at the back of the house with robot burger flippers and fry cookers and the rest of it. And the rubber will really hit the road when robot trucks hit our highways in earnest. How many of you know a truck driver here in the state? There are 3.5 million truck drivers in our country, and we now have trucks that even 2 weeks ago can cross the country without any human intervention. We just had a butter truck that transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania. Why butter? I have no idea. But you can Google robot butter truck. And they thought it just like, well, it'd be a fun thing to transport butter. So, my friends in California, and I'm friends with some of the technologists who are working on this stuff, they tell me they're 98% of the way to self-driving trucks. And the reason why they are confident they can get the last 2% is because the cost savings around self-driving trucks are estimated to be $168 billion a year. So think about how much money that gives you to try and solve that last 2%. If you're an investor and someone comes to you and says, hey, I can help solve this problem, I just need $500 million to hire some of the best engineers in the country to work on it, then you're like, here you go, because you see the biggest pot of gold in American business lying in front of you. So these are the changes that helped get Donald Trump into the Oval Office. We're in the third inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. When is the last time you heard a politician say fourth industrial revolution? Just now, New Hampshire. And I'm barely a politician. So these were the facts and figures that I unpacked in 2017. Donald Trump wins. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be Mr. Job Creation. Trump's in the Oval Office. We're going through this incredible set of changes. So I went to our leaders in Washington, D.C., and I asked them, what are we going to do to help our people manage this time, this transition? Immigrants are being scapegoated for problems immigrants have next to nothing to do with. So how are we going to solve the real problems? And what do you think the folks in D.C. said to me when I asked, what are we going to do to help our people?
Don't talk about it.
Run for president.
They definitely did not say that. The three big responses I got were, number one, Andrew, we cannot talk about that. Number two, we should study that further. And number three, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. And I said, that sounds really great. But I took a look at the studies. Do you all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? No. I'm anchoring you very low because it is low. 0 to 15%. They're a total dud. The reality is, of those manufacturing workers, half of them left the workforce and never worked again. And of that group, half filed for disability. We then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in those communities to the point where now America's life expectancy has declined for 3 years in a row, in large part because drug overdoses and suicides have now overtaken vehicle deaths as cause of death in the United States. You know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row as it has for the last 3 years? The Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go back that far. It is highly unusual for life expectancy to decline ever in a developed country. Ordinarily, we get richer, stronger, healthier. But in the United States of America, we've gone down and then down and then down again. But when I said retraining is not working to the folks in DC, one of them actually said, well, I guess we'll get better at it. The truth is this, that the folks in DC will succeed whether or not we succeed or fail. And one person in DC said something that brought me here to you all today, this fine New Year's Day morning, January 1, 2020. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here is going to do anything about this. Because fundamentally, this is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we would do anything about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in 2 years. Because that was 2 years ago in New Hampshire, and here we are. So now, January 1st, 2020, I stand before you. I'm fifth in the polls to be the Democratic nominee. We raised $10 million last quarter in increments of only $30 each, so my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But all this money we've generated, it's 100% grassroots, people-powered, no corporate PAC money. This is the campaign to rewrite the rules to work for us, to work for our families. Now, you're here today, and we're in New Hampshire, and it's like my favorite place to campaign, because this is the only place where democracy is still working the way it was originally intended. Now, you're a bit spoiled by it, but I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? 1,000 Californians each. So how many people are in this room right now? What's the fire code in this room? And this is a pretty packed room, so I'm gonna say maybe 160? It's about right. That's 4 football stadiums worth of Californians. That's the power in this room. That's why I love campaigning here, because you literally have the ability to change the course of history. You're some of the most powerful people in our society today. I know it doesn't feel like it. You're just like living your life, you're seeing a presidential candidate, and you're kind of used to it. But you have almost unparalleled power to change where we head as a country. And the question is, how are we going to use that power? What sort of vision are you going to take to the rest of the country? Now, I know at some point in the last number of weeks, you heard this. There's a guy running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Now, some of you are clapping, but many of you thought, that's a gimmick, that's too good to be true, that will never happen. I understand. This is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of our country, called it the citizen's dividend. Martin Luther King, whose son I had the privilege of meeting with in Atlanta, said that this is where we needed to go as a country to have a guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. It is what Martin Luther King was fighting for when he was assassinated in 1968. 1,000 economists endorsed this plan in the 60s. It was so mainstream it passed the US House of Representatives twice under Richard Nixon in 1971. The Family Assistance Plan would have guaranteed an income floor for all Americans. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that?
Alaska.
And how does Alaska pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Technology.
Data, technology, AI, software, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? We joke, but if our data is now worth tens of billions of dollars a year, who's getting the checks? Facebook, Amazon, Google, and the mega tech companies that are paying zero or near zero in taxes. This is the reality of the 21st century. I believe that our data should still be ours, even if we lend it to the tech companies. What do you think?
Yes.
So in this context, when all of this value is getting extracted from our communities, this dividend begins to make more and more sense, particularly in the face of unprecedented changes in our workforce. And if you have this dividend of $1,000 a month in our hands, in our community's hands, where would the money go in real life?
Student loans.
Small coffee shops, I like that. Student loans, car repairs, savings. How much of it would stay right here in New Hampshire? Most of it, not all of it. You get your own Netflix password. Some of it would float up. But most of it would go right here to your local economy, to car repairs you've been putting off, to daycare expenses, to Little League signups, to local nonprofits, to religious organizations. This is the trickle-up economy, New Hampshire, from our people, our families, and our communities up. This would make our people stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, give our kids a better chance to learn. Right now, we are being told that things are going great when many of us are not sure they actually are great in our communities. Right now, corporate profits, record highs, GDP, record highs. Also at record highs, stress, anxiety, depression, financial insecurity, student loan debt, suicides, drug overdoses. I'm going to ask you a fundamental question. If your GDP is going up and your life expectancy is going down, which do you listen to? Even the inventor of GDP said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement for national well-being and we should never use it as that. And here we are riding it off a cliff 100 years later saying GDP, GDP. Robot trucks will be great for GDP, but they're going to be very bad for many American communities. So what we have to do is we have to line up how we're measuring our economic progress. And the example that's closest to home for me is that my wife Evelyn is at home with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. What does her work get valued at in our economic measurements every day? Zero. And it's not just her, it's caregivers around the country, volunteers, coaches, mentors, many artists, many journalists. A lot of the things that we value most are getting zeroed out by the market more and more. And this applies most to women and underrepresented minorities because we all know that women do much more of the unrecognized and uncompensated work in our society. We're trying to say to our corporate environments, treat women better, when the corporations themselves operate in this fundamentally anti-woman marketplace. And then the argument you're making for elevating women is that you'll make more money if you elevate women. And to me, that misses the point. The point is that we need to rewrite the rules so that everyone is valued, regardless of whether they're making the business more money or not.
Yes.
And I say this as someone who's run businesses, yes, but I also say this as the parent of an autistic child, where I see that if we continue to confuse economic value and human value, we are going to lose on an epic, catastrophic scale. That's how you wind up having otherwise reasonable people say we should turn coal miners into coders. Because you say, wait, if you don't have any value in the marketplace, we're going to somehow figure out a way for you to have some new value, even if it does not make any sense on the face of it. That is the race we cannot win. I'm friends with some of the leading technologists in the country. They say, I've seen what's in the lab in artificial intelligence, and it's going to be much more disruptive than people know. You know how that conversation never goes? I have seen what's coming out of the lab, and everything will be fine. The more someone knows, the more concerned they are. I spoke to a group of 70 CEOs in New York City, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with AI and software in the coming years? Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All 70. The fact is you could fire any CEO who didn't have his hand up, because we have a system that's designed around maximizing the bottom line, and unfortunately the bottom line and our well-being have diverged. In New Hampshire, it is up to you to line them up. You're the only people in the country who can do it. It's up to you to see to it that Amazon pays its fair share in taxes. And that if we can get our tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, eventually every robot truck mile, we can actually include ourselves in all of the gains of this economy, rather than more and more of us feeling like they're being left behind. And that goes much more for rural areas that are getting depleted successively. It's one reason why we have this urban-rural divide and so many people are turning towards Donald Trump, because the Democratic Party is not addressing what's happening in many of our communities. Donald Trump's our president today because he had a very, very simple story. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response?
Sorry, it's already great.
America's already great. Remember that, New Hampshire? I know it's been a long 3 years, but it's about to end. Oh my gosh, it's been 4 years? It's been 4 years as of today. When she said America's already great, that response did not quite work. We have to acknowledge the depth and severity and reality of the problems on the ground, because they are real, but then we need real solutions. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Now build a wall, I'm going to turn the clock backwards, I'm going to bring the old jobs back. New Hampshire, you know we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the challenges of the 21st century. And we need to evolve in the way we think about ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much, New Hampshire. Thank you. You may not know this, but math is an acronym, and what does it stand for? Make America think harder. That's right. That is your job, New Hampshire. It is your job to move this country, not left, not right, but forward. And that is where you are going to take us in 2020. Thank you all so much. Happy New Year! It's 2020. That decade's over. This one's just beginning. And I know just the way we're going to start this decade off by taking a question or two or three. And this gentleman managed to sit in the front row right next to the mic, not a plant. I have no idea what he's about to say. Here we go.
Good afternoon. The Constitution gives the central government the power to fix the standard of weights and measures, and the law they passed in 1866, making the metric system legal, still lets the states impose speed limits in miles and force grocers to post unit prices per pound. And when my wife filed for citizenship, it says, write your height in feet and inches. Do not use metric units, because so many bureaucrats and politicians are on the side of the dummies who don't know the metric system and are proud of it. So, Mr. Make Americans Think Harder, can we, the people of the United States, count on President Yang to secure the blessings of the metric system?
I love this question so much. I am a fan of the metric system. And you're not going to believe, well, you will. You will definitely do this. But the metric system is actually safer. Because when you're dealing with microdoses of medication for infants, measuring it in milliliters is much safer than measuring something in like teaspoons or tablespoons. And you actually can confuse teaspoons and tablespoons and end up giving people the wrong dosage. So the metric system would literally save lives every year. So to the extent that we can migrate towards the metric system, I would love to make it happen. I will say that I think many Americans would highly resist giving their height in centimeters or meters, because I have no idea what my height is in the metric system. Like if someone gives me their height in feet and inches, I know what they're talking about. That said, the metric system is the world standard. There are actually difficulties that arise from us being on a different standard, and it would be safer. So thank you, sir. It's very wise. I like to go man, woman. So we need an awesome question from... Oh, here we go.
Hi.
Yet another non-plant.
Oh, no, I don't need.
Oh, it's not long enough. You have to go up.
There's a lot of talk in the media about how great the economy's going right now, and it's a big reason why there's concern that Trump will be reelected.
Yep.
And I would like your take on the facts and figures that they use to justify how great the economy is.
I would love to.
Tell us who you are, please.
My name is Sarah. I'm from Connecticut.
Yes, oh, yes, Sarah. So Sarah's question is, hey, there are all of these headlines about how great the economy is, and that favors Donald Trump, and how would I respond to that? So I mentioned a little bit how GDP's up, and corporate profits are up, but many people don't feel like they're included in this. The three big measurements that we use to measure our economic progress are GDP, stock market prices, and what's the third? Headline unemployment, right? Now, if you look back to when Donald Trump was running for president, he said that the unemployment rate was fake news. Remember that? Yeah. He said, it doesn't measure the fact that millions have dropped out of the workforce. And then he became president. All of a sudden, it became real news. The headline unemployment rate is dramatically misleading for a number of reasons. Number one, if you drop out of the workforce, you no longer count. Right now, our labor force participation rate in the United States is 63%, the same levels as El Salvador and Costa Rica, and close to a multi-decade low. Millions of Americans have left the workforce, particularly unskilled men, and that does not count in the unemployment rate. Number two, the unemployment rate doesn't include whether you're underemployed, which unfortunately applies to 40 to 44% of recent college graduates who are doing a job that does not require a degree. So if you're a young person and that's the situation you're in, you should know that's very normal. And if you're the parent of a young person who's in that situation, you should know it's not their fault. It's about half of recent college graduates. But the headline unemployment rate obscures that. It also obscures people who are in temp gig or contract jobs that don't have benefits or are working multiple jobs to make ends meet. All of that just gets checked off as employed. If you look at the more relevant statistics, which are income and affordability, then things are very, very dark because people's compensation has been essentially flat while our housing prices have crept up, our education and daycare expenses have shot up, and our healthcare expenses only go in one direction, that's up. Does anyone ever remember getting a notice from their health insurance company being like, great news, your rates went down? No one in American history has gotten that letter. Because their business model is literally, it's like, oh, another year, time to ratchet the prices up. Unfortunately, colleges operate the same way. It's like, oh, another year, prices go up. So what's happened is that affordability has become an increasing problem for many, many Americans, and it's what's driving us to all of this stress. Why the heck is college 2.5 times more expensive than it was when I went to school? Did it get 2.5 times better? No, it just got 2.5 times more expensive. And if you're a family, you're like, well, I have no choice but to pay. And then the government's like, don't worry, we'll give you loans. And so we're up to $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. The average graduate's now graduating with tens of thousands of dollars in debt and a job market that's 40 to 44% likely not to have a job for them that actually require the degree. So this is the ugliness that the three big stats ignores. Stock market prices correspond to essentially the top 10 to 20% of the population, which may be some people in this room totally cool, but the bottom 50% of Americans own essentially zero in stock. So if you say, hey, stock market price is up, then half Americans are like, what's that to me? So we do have, in some ways, a growing economy that's been juiced by the $1.5 trillion tax cut that Trump passed, the majority of which went to shareholders. So if you were a shareholder and you saw your 401k go up, yeah, that's normal. But that's not the majority of Americans who do not feel included in this boom. And in my opinion, if you have a predictable sugar rush of a boom fueled by a $1.5 trillion tax cut that went to the big corporations, just added to the public debt, that's not cause for celebration. That's like, hey, guess what? I just took money from our kids, gave it to the corporations, yay me. I mean, like that's not good public policy at all. So we're all, not all of us, but we've been through boom and bust cycles before. And anyone who thinks that this economy is just going to keep on rising to the moon forever, like, isn't seeing some of the signs. Because you look at some of the overhyped companies that are now crashing in value, that is the early sign of a downturn or what's to come. Like, how many of you saw the headlines about like WeWork, the like utter fiasco that is WeWork? When a WeWork happens, it is not alone. Like, you go through dozens of other companies, you'll find the same nonsense, honestly. Where you look up and say, how the heck did you value this company at billions of dollars when it's literally just burning cash, hand over fist? And that's like a canary in a coal mine. So that's my long-winded response to the reason why no one should be that excited about the headline economic numbers because they don't reflect what a lot of Americans are actually experiencing.
Great. I think we have time for one more question before we assume
Sorry, it
our
must be because
photo
I'm
line.
long-winded in the answer. Sorry about that. Sir.
Good. My name is Faris. I'm from Syria. Ever met anyone from Syria?
I believe I have.
Good. So I like you. I follow you. I open your website on a daily basis. My question for you is, first, I think that, in my opinion, your weak point is that you don't have experience. You might not have the good reaction to an international incident, for example. So let's say that you're president and you heard that there's a chemical attack in Syria that killed 100,000 people, 50% of them are children. What is your reaction?
Well, first, thank you for the support, and I'd like to take this opportunity to outline my foreign policy perspective more generally. I think President Trump has done us a lot of harm by being so erratic and unreliable, particularly with our long-standing partners and allies. We need to renew our investment in the State Department and diplomacy. James Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense, said, the more we spend on our diplomats, the less we have to spend on ammunition. And that is the right way to go. We're spending $700 billion a year or so on the military-industrial complex that may not actually be making us safer. So to me, we have to get smarter about trying to address what the real threats to our security are, and then invest in rebuilding partnerships and alliances around the world and let our historical friends know that America is open for business. In terms of a specific incident like the one you described, I would sit with my advisors and say, how can we make sure that this is appropriately addressed and never happens again? The ideal would be to prevent it from happening, but of course we're not in position to be able to do that right now. So I have a three-part test for a military intervention in a foreign theater. Number one, there has to be a vital national interest of ours at stake, or the ability to avert a humanitarian crisis, which this would clearly be. Number two, we have to have a clearly defined time frame where we can look our troops in the eyes and say, you will be here for this long, and then we will be able to have you come home. And not one of these imaginary timelines where like, yeah, you think you can get it done in this time frame, but actually be able to look people in the eyes and say, this is when you will be back. And number three, you have to have partners and allies that are willing to join you in the mission, which in this case, I'm sure we would. So if these three conditions are met, then I would consider intervening militarily. And the scenario that you just described sounds like it would be very likely to satisfy those conditions. Thank you so much, New Hampshire. Oh, I love this state. I hope that you are excited to help send this message to the rest of the country that this is still ours, that we can make this place work for us again. Right now, Washington, D.C. is the richest city in our country. What do they produce? I'm going to leave that to your imagination. But it's up to you to retake our government from the corporate interests that have overrun it and send a very clear message to the rest of the country that instead of us being subject to the machines have to work for us. Thank you all so much. All
right, let's give it up again. Andrew Yang. All right, yeah, you can stand up. You can rise up for Andrew Yang. There you go. All right. Who here would like a selfie with the next president? I kind of thought. Here's how we're going to do it. There has to be an order to the madness. Line up to, if you can see my hand, to my left, your right. Line up that way. If you started there, buy a lottery ticket. You did well. We're going to do a brief press gaggle. Hang tight. Line up now. Give the press what they need. We'll begin. And we will flow through the line. Happy New Year. Thanks for being here again.
What would you like me to do with the camera?
Oh, I'm putting it away.
Put it away.
Yeah, I know.
Go. Go on.
Sorry. Now is a picture taking time. Lots of people line up. Hey!
Does that start here in New Hampshire?
Guys, if you're looking to get photos, it starts in Iowa, but I know that New Hampshire is going to help make its voice very, very loud and clear come February of next year, and history will never be made without New Hampshire being a big part of it.
Are you, given your poll numbers, given the amount of money you've been raising, do you think you're getting the respect you deserve in this primary?
We're thrilled with the fact that our support is growing here in New Hampshire and around the country very, very quickly. I do think that the media has been a bit of a lagging indicator, but the media is catching up to the fact that we're a real contender in this race. We are growing when many other candidates are shrinking or even dropping out.
I mean, why is it that you hear from some people, yeah, I love Andrew Yang, but I don't think he's really going to make it that, all the way. And then when you look at your poll numbers and the money you're raising, you're inching into that top tier.
Well, I'm new to many Americans, and I have to take every opportunity to introduce myself and my vision for the country. I think as soon as polls get run here in New Hampshire and the other early states, people are going to see that we're rising to the top tier.
Mr. Yang, you said getting rid of the electoral college is impractical, but we have a line here in the state of New Hampshire. They represent Eastern New Hampshire, represents 1,000 Californians. And many people who do not like the electoral system says that's unfair. So what is your response?
The best way that we can amend the Electoral College is to have proportional allocation of electors by state. So what are the problems we have right now? One of the biggest problems is that presidential candidates have no incentive to campaign in anything that's not a swing state when the general election comes around. So the rest of the country looks up and says, hey, why is it all about Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania?
Okay guys, thank you for watching. I think I'm going to wrap up now. I'm going to take some pictures now with my camera, okay? And thank you so much to be with us. Happy New Year.